Last Thanksgiving Day, I accidentally swam from the island of Nevis to the island of St. Kitts. Now, in all honesty, just to clarify, I could have swam it as a relay, but I forgot that that was an option. I was on the island of Nevis, specifically at Wally Beach, for a swim holiday with a group called Swim Trek. And the span of water between Nevis and St. Kitts is about 4 kilometers. It's like 2.5 miles. And the cool thing is that you can see the bottom of the sea the entire way. And there's some really beautiful elements. So I saw starfish and fan coral. I saw a rainbow. It was incredible. It was stunning. Just the feeling of the water, being one with the water, the different shades of blue. And there were also some incredibly challenging times. My left shoulder began to ache. I formed a blister on my left toe because the fins I was wearing got really rugged. I had to discard them, and that meant I was less buoyant. And then there was the moment where I got stuck over a rock. I swam into an eddy and I had a panic attack. And in that moment, I thought, why the hell am I out here? I'm perfectly fine hugging a coastline. But actually, I finished. I finished with my swimming buddy, Peggy. It took us 3 hours, a little over 3 hours, and it took us 5K instead of 4K because of the shifting currents. Now, it wasn't until a few weeks later, when I was reflecting on this swim, that I realized this wasn't just about a swim. This wasn't just about endurance and the amount of kilometers and the amount of time. We had actually accomplished a creative act. Because when faced with a span of liminal space and ambiguity, you don't get from Wally Beach in Nevis to Reggae Beach in St. Kitts through a straight line. You can't use an instruction manual. You can't use a set of nice, neat directions or a roadmap. Instead, what you need is a compass. All creative acts require a compass, and specifically a compass with 2 navigational forces, the forces of wonder and rigor. So I'm just curious, if you don't mind, if you're able, would love to know how many of you here self-define as being creative. 1, if it's like, not so much, not really. And 5, oh yeah, I'm definitely creative. So 1s, 2s, I don't really self-identify as creative. Okay, a little bit, few people here or there. Okay, thank you. How about people, absolutely, I'm definitely creative. Awesome, great. Well, I'm a creativity strategist, and I help leaders at Fortune 500 companies connect the dots between creativity and business results. And I speak to audiences in tech and healthcare and financial services, and often they don't self-identify as being creative. And they don't self-identify as being creative because a lot of the times they're conflating creativity with art. So they might think of music, or they think of visual arts. They might even think of dance, which is great because artists are exceptional at wrestling with the ambiguity of the creative process. But the arts are only part of the story. In the early years of building Figure 8 Thinking, my company, I would get invited into companies to help them build cultures of innovation. And sometimes it became a bit of innovation theater. Or we became known as people who went into a room and played with Post-it notes all day, which wasn't fair and wasn't the truth. And I quickly discerned that we might be starting in the wrong place, that where we actually needed to start was with creativity and building our capacity for creativity in order to build sustainable cultures of innovation. But here's the challenge. It would be really hard for me to walk up to a bunch of executives in these Fortune 500 companies and say, hey guys, we actually need to be starting with creativity. They would look at me like I had 3 heads. So thus began my work and research to figure out an accessible, democratized way to explain creativity that made sense to a range of people. I tapped into my PhD research on improvisational organizations. I did my own miniature ethnographies, and I even wrapped it all up in a book. And I landed on a theory. I call it the wonder rigor theory, to make this idea of sustainable innovation more accessible through the lens of creativity. And it's as follows. That creativity is your ability to toggle between wonder and rigor to solve problems, deliver novel value, and discern meaning. And if you begin to think about creativity in this way, then you quickly realize that the best engineers and scientists and CFOs and executive assistants and farmers and teachers and plumbers and artists are super creative when they're doing this toggling between wonder and rigor to solve problems. Because creativity is not woo-woo, it is the engine for innovation, and it's part of our birthright as humans to be creative. So what do I mean by wonder? Wonder is about awe and audacity and curiosity. Socrates, as I studied, said that wisdom begins in wonder. And then centuries later, the Jewish theologian and civil rights activist Abraham Heschel wrote, "It's wonder, not doubt, which is the root of all knowledge." So if we want to become wiser and more knowledgeable, we must commit to designing space and time to wonder. So wonder is typically understandable as a dimension of creativity. We get that, but it's its counterpart that is equally important, which is rigor. Rigor is about focus and time on task and discipline and skill mastery. Rigor is not particularly sexy, and it's often done in very solitary ways. Leonardo da Vinci said that any obstacle can be destroyed through rigor. And the American dancer and choreographer Twyla Tharp said that before you can think out of a box, you must start with a box. So wonder and rigor are copacetic. They are counterparts. Wonder is found in the midst of rigor, and rigor cannot be sustained without wonder. My personal compass for wonder and rigor has its roots very early on in the way I was raised. My parents were from the school of figure it out, but they also exposed me to dance classes and to nature and really seeded in me this curiosity to explore. So I took my personal compass of wonder and rigor all the way through my point of being a college sophomore. It's 1989. I'm from Philly. I call home to my parents. My dad's on the kitchen phone. My mom's on the phone in the bedroom. And I'm struggling with my first world problem of what to major in. They had sacrificed a lot for a very expensive education, and I wanted to make sure I had a good job at the end of it. So I started talking about how I was almost failing economics, and I thought political science was really boring. And because they knew me, they said, "What are you interested in?" So apologetically, I began to confess, I really love this Anthropology 101 course I just started taking. And oh my goodness, these Africana studies classes are amazing. And they said, that's what you should study. And my father said, Natalie, if you study what you love, you'll have to turn away opportunities. And with that, there was this load that was removed from my shoulders. And I went on to steadily follow my heart with my compass of wonder and rigor. So I carry that forward a few decades later. I'm now 15 years into being a professor. It's about 5:15 on a Wednesday. I'm walking back from a photocopier machine with my arms laden down with 11 more papers to grade, 3 more recruiting calls to make, and I've got to text John, my husband, one more time to tell him I'm going to be late for dinner. And I hear someone say in a really terse voice, "I don't want to do this." And that voice was my own. Now, what do you do in your dream job and all of a sudden you hit a wall of burnout? Well, I sit down in my office chair and I have a reckoning moment because I thought, oh no, I've been at this crossroads before. So that weekend I sit at our kitchen table, I take out a blank piece of paper and I draw a line down the center, and on the left, I make a list of everything I despised and loathed about my current state. And on the right, I made a list of everything I loved and adored and cherished about being a professor and teaching. And then I zoomed in on everything on the right-hand side of the page, and a new question emerged to me. I thought, what if I could still do everything on the right-hand side of the page, but it's just not called being a professor? And unbeknownst to me, on that right-hand side of the page was a cataloging of the beginning of my work as a creativity strategist, my commitment to helping organizations build creativity as a capacity and understand that it was a strategic competency. Now, I'm not the only one who thinks this. In a world full of unprecedented burnout, new rules for remote work, and ubiquitous technology, we need a compass. We need a new way to identify our true north to navigate our way forward. So, for example, the World Economic Forum has ranked creativity as the #2 job skill by 2027, according to their 2023 Future Job Skills Report. And then other research has also fundamentally scaffolded this idea. 87% of executive leaders around the world identify creativity as being as important as cost control and efficiencies. That's amazing. The problem is that 75% of employees feel like they're not living up to their potential creatively. So there's this gap analysis between us acknowledging that creativity is essential for market competitiveness, but people not being given the space and time to build their creative capacity. And it doesn't end there. There's other inputs of creativity that are becoming increasingly relevant and important in the research. So 50% of organizations that prototype are more likely to launch successful products and services. This is according to research by McKinsey. Teams that collaborate are 5 times more likely to be high performing. And the economist Amar Bideh, his research points out that 90% of successful businesses, not just mediocre businesses, but successful businesses, abandon their original strategy. So, what's the headline? What's the takeaway? Soft skills are hardcore. Soft skills such as curiosity, actively listening, empathy, collaboration, the ability to negotiate, all the things that AI, automation, and robotics can leverage. We can amplify what makes us uniquely human in this moment of time if we identify our wonder rigor compass. And that's because creativity has a business ROI. There's not a fuzzy dotted line between creativity and business results. There is a solid, bold line. I'll give you 3 examples. When we commit to building our capacity for creativity, we must engage in more collaborative work. I know collaboration doesn't feel good short term, but man, the gains we make long term are incredible. When we collaborate more, productivity increases, and when productivity goes up, efficiencies go up. When efficiencies go up, costs go down. That's a business result. Example number 2. When we commit to building our creative capacity, we must be more curious. Curiosity is a learned behavior and it's a tool. When we are more curious, we become client obsessed. When we become client obsessed, instead of focusing on our shiny little objects of the products that we want to sell, we build brand loyalty. We build value in the marketplace. And example number 3, when we commit to building our capacity for creativity, we necessarily have much more inventive thinking. And we have more inventive thinking, we identify new revenue streams. Also a business result. Now, what if you're not in business? What if you are a parent working on your relationship with your child? What if you're a member of a team just trying to get through another day? What if you are heading up a major organization? What do you take from here? Well, what I want you to think about is the possibility of your next difficult conversation or challenging meeting. And instead of thinking about having to enter that situation with answers and with solutions, with an instruction manual or a roadmap, I want to equip you instead with 2 significant questions that will carry you forward to toggle between wonder and rigor. The first question is, what if? What if is this beautiful, blue sky, expansive, imagination-rich question? When I ask myself, what if, my whole body lightens. So when we ask what if, it could be, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm right? What if I could still do everything on the right-hand side of the page, but it's just not called my same old job title? What if I could swim from the island of Nevis to the island of St. Kitts? And then we must follow it up with the rigorous question of now what? Now, what is my very next first step? Now, what is a simple experiment we might build to put this into action? Now, what is a prototype that we can hack together with duct tape to figure out if this sticks? What if and now what are the questions to equip yourselves with to know how to toggle between wonder and rigor to build this creative capacity. Wonder is found in the midst of rigor. Rigor cannot be sustained without wonder. If we spend too much time with our head in the clouds, we won't get any traction. If we spend too much time in the weeds and get really myopic, we will burn out. We need both. And in order for us to identify our true north, we have to commit to building this creative capacity, to using creativity as a strategic competency for sustainable innovation. And this will help all of you to identify what's possible, reimagine what is essential, and create what's transformative. Thank you.